up, Double Jellyfish? It's Tracy. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of time every day to hang out with me. I really appreciate it. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing red staples. This is part 2. I will list in the down bar below the first part where you can hear me chat about 10 staples that you could run in all or a variety of different red decks for Commander. I only talk about 10 cards in this video, and as y'all know, I'm not a red mage, but you know what? I'm trying, okay? I built Reen. We're working on it. We're working our way through. So let's just jump into it. Let's first start talking. I think we're starting off really strong, which is Magus. I don't know why it's hard for me to say, of the moon. This is Blood Moon on a stick, basically. And there's really not like a whole lot to say. It's 3 mana 2/2, non-basic lands or mountain. My personal best case scenario for this card is running this in a mono-colored deck. You're playing mono red in Commander. You play this card because it's going to stop your opponents. Like, if you're going to be playing like a 5-color deck, I don't necessarily think that this card is probably the thing that you'd want to be running unless you're running like all basics, which seems a little bit wild for, you know, the more colors you go, I feel like the more non-basics you need. But anyways, this is a really good card. If I had a mono red deck, you bet your bottom dollar I would be running this card. It's really cool. Okay. The next card is Imperial Recruiter. Does anyone remember when this card was ridiculously expensive and then it got reprinted in, what was this, M25 or something? And I feel like it got printed in, like, it was at Double Masters 2 or Modern Horizons, and then it just dropped completely. Yeah, anyone else remember that? Okay. This is a 3 mana for a 1/1, and at ATBs, you search your library for a creature with power 2 or less. So you have to think about it like this, is you're looking at 0, 1, and 2 mana cost 0 mana cost creatures? I don't know if that exists. There's like, I feel like that Cobalt that's like 0 mana perhaps. But you're able to get things with 1 or 2 that are 1 or 2 mana, and you get to put it into your hand, which is a really, really awesome tutor. If you're playing this, I would definitely recommend doing like a look at your deck and laying it out and figuring out how many targets you have. And then based on that, you could definitely throw an Imperial Recruiter in there, because if you only have like 5 targets or something like that, maybe not the best thing to run. But you know, if you're running a handful like 10 or so, I definitely think that Imperial Recruiter is a good option for you. And then you're left with a 1/1. Great blocker. What else can we say? Okay, now let's talk about Cathartic Reunion. I run this card in, I think I have it in 2 of my decks. I have it in Ladies, because Ladies, hello. And I have it in Magus, I believe, as well. So this card is 2 mana, and as additional cost, you do have to discard 2 cards, which potentially might be a little bit irritating. So I definitely be cautious about making sure you're doing this where you don't necessarily mind that those things are in the graveyard because you're doing some sort of recursion or something like that, or you don't mind you have like an excess of lands or something like that. Or whatever the situation may be. I have this in Magus where I do have some graveyard recursion, so if I discard stuff, I can always get it back. That's like one of my favorite things to do. Like if you're playing black or red, this seems like a good option to run, because then you can, you know, like animate dead your whatever that you just discarded, which is really cool. And then you get to draw 3 cards. We love drawing cards. It's the best thing to do in the game, especially like if you're running like mono red or something like that, you know, you got to look at your choices, you know, make sure you're capitalizing off of those draw cards. So okay, so the other day I was playing Magic, and I don't even remember what I was playing, but one of my friends, Brad, was like, Tracy, do you like your hand? And I was like, you know, I'm cool with it, whatever the situation may be. And he's like, okay. And then he played Reforge the Soul, and I was like, what the heck, man. Reforge the Soul is really cool, and something that I really, really like about this card is a lot of times with those miracle stuff, you feel like you're losing out so much. If, let's just say, like, you play your Cathartic Reunion, you draw those cards, and this is not the first card you drew, and so you're like, man, and then I gotta pay all this mana. I'll give you an example, like Entreat the Angels or something like that. You feel like you're losing a lot out on not miracling this. To be honest with you, I don't think the actual hard cost of this card is actually that egregious at all. For 5 mana to do this, I really don't think that that's that bad. So basically for 5 mana, it says that each, or if you have the miracle cost, obviously it's like the most ideal situation. I'm not here to like disagree with that, but I'm just saying if you happen to like pay 5 mana for it, I don't think it's the most crazy thing. I think that's what he actually did that game, is he paid 5 mana for it. So each player discards their hand and then draws 7. Yes, you are potentially, you know, helping possibly your opponents. However, if you're playing this in a deck like, why am I blanking on the commander name, that you, every time you draw a card, you lose life. You guys know that commander I'm talking about? It's the Esper, not Esper, that's the Grixis color commander. Anyways, if you do that, that seems really cool. Or if you know that your opponents have drawn or have more than 7 cards in their hand or something like that, you can Reforge the Soul or whatever. And for the most part, a lot of people, like, probably, depending on what's going on in their hand, they might not counter this card or whatever because they might want that to happen or whatever reason. So yeah, I like Reforge the Soul. Okay, next up we have Chain Reaction for my people who need a board wipe, because board wipes are the best. So Chain Reaction is really cool. It deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures in the battlefield. Let me tell you something. When you are playing Commander, there are always going to be creatures. Like, it's just a given, right? So that you're going to be playing this, and you're probably going to be doing, there's like 10 creatures on the battlefield. Cool. Everything takes 10 damage. This card is awesome. It's also only 4 mana. You're very likely going to be killing, if not the whole board, the majority of the board. Chain Reaction is really cool. I think I have this in Omnath. I might have taken it out though, because I have a lot of removal, like with Omnath, because I just have lightning bolts every single turn for the most part, or, you know, I have a lot of lightning bolts. But Chain Reaction is really cool if you're playing mono colored, or even if you're not and you need a board wipe. There we go. Chain Reaction is a good one. Okay, now let's chat about Seize the Day. This is for my people who are like, hey, I'm trying to go real aggressive with my one creature, whether that be your commander or whether that be your just really big dumb thing that you just want to get in, or you're running Eldrazi, or like whatever it is that you're really doing. Seize the Day is really cool. So you get to untap target creature after this main phase. There's additional combat, and you get an additional main phase, which is really cool. So I think this card is really cool. So you get an additional combat phase, which is really cool. So if you're doing like Voltron or something like that, or again, you've got a big Eldrazi or whatever your situation is, you just get to have an additional combat phase, which is incredibly strong. And it's got flashback. And let me tell you something. First off, the flashback cost on this, I don't think is that bad, because the card is 4 mana and then the flashback cost is 3, which I think is really cool. And on top of that, no one remembers like flashback. Like, and what I mean by that is, like, if you have something in your graveyard with flashback or whatever, people are probably not going to remember, like, unless they're like avidly like looking at graveyards or whatever. Like, most people are going to forget that they have that, and they're like, oh, it's fine, I can take that damage. Then you're like, flashback, and then they're like, I like should have removed it, or whatever the situation might be. So good card. Okay, let's talk about Anger. Anger is really cool. I really love this whole cycle of these creatures. Whenever they're in your graveyard, you get some sort of effect. And Anger is, if it's in your graveyard, you have haste, which is really, really awesome, because that's like one of my personal favorite things to do. Like in Reen, for example, is I'm like, okay, I'm gonna play my big thing, but then I always just feel better whenever I have haste, because I know that damage is gonna happen. Because if I know that if someone else is allowed to untap, they might have that sorcery speed board wipe or that Chain Reaction or their Wrath of God or whatever it is, I know that if I've got haste, I can at least get in, hopefully with some points of damage, unless they've got instant speed removal or something like that. But Anger, really, really cool. And it's also really easy to get this in your graveyard or whatever. Or the other thing too that I see a lot with cards like this is someone's like, I'm going to attack you with my Anger, and then they just like don't block, and then you can just hit people for 2 damage for a really long time. But yeah, it's super easy to probably get this in your graveyard, because there's so many things. Someone's going to be blowing up the board or whatever, or it's going to die in combat or whatever, and then you can just get haste, which is really cool. Okay, the next card is Magus of the Wheel. This card is Wheel of Fortune on a stick, and Wheel of Fortune is also really, 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 really expensive. So if you're not out there trying to spend a couple $100s on a Magic card, which, you know, fair, Magus of the Wheel is a good option for you. So this card is 2 mana for a 3/3. You sack it, and each player discards their hand, then draws 7. Let me just tell you something. Let me tell you. A lot of times I think these cards are slightly, sorry if you can hear Zelda sliding on the floor. She's playing with a mouse, and it's really funny because they slip inside on the floors, and it's really amusing. But anyways, so with a lot of cards like this is I get irritated because they're on the field and I don't know when it's going to happen. Same how I feel about Neverill's Disc, because I'm like, when are you going to pop this off? You know what I mean? You can be really annoying with this card, because you're just going to sit there and be like, yeah, I'm just going to keep this off when I need it. And then someone goes to remove it or kill the board or whatever the situation is. And then you're like, cool. And then you're going to pop this off. And then you get a Reforge the Soul on a stick that you've only paid really 5 mana for, which really isn't that bad. Or you got your Anger in your graveyard, or you got some other way to get this haste, and you can pop it off immediately, which is really cool. And yeah, my personal, like, these are just so annoying because they stay on the field and then you're like, when is this going to happen? And then you just get irritated, you know? Anyone else? Okay, so it's so funny. I was actually looking at this card for this video and I realized that I actually have to put this in Reen because it's so ridiculous, and that is Relentless Assault. If you are playing an aggressive type of deck, this card seems awesome. So basically it's 4 mana, sorcery. You untap all creatures that attack this turn, so you do have to attack with those creatures. After this main phase, there's an additional combat, which is so cool. This card is really similar to the other one that we talked about, but that one's only for 1 creature. This is for all of your attacking creatures. If you're playing an aggressive deck, I would really recommend this. I'm gonna put this card to the side and then add it to my list for Reen, because Reen is very aggressive and I'm trying to be very aggressive in that deck. And Relentless Assault really gets you there. It's also only 4 mana. Card seems really cool. Card kills people. We love that for us. Okay, the last red card that I'm going to be talking about in this video is one of my personal favorite cards. I have this card in Riku and I absolutely love it, and that is Storm-Kiln Artist. I was actually surprised that I didn't talk about this card in the first part because that's how much I love it. And you know, I mean business when I say that I love a red card. Like, let's just be real here. So this card is 4 mana for a 2/2 and it gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control. This may or may not be relevant if you're like playing artifacts, like cool, but if you're not, it's okay because it's got Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant sorcery spell, you create a treasure token. Now, just because you're not playing copies doesn't mean that you can't run Storm-Kiln Artisan. I do have this in Riku, obviously, where I am making a bunch of copies of things. However, I'm casting a ton of instants and sorceries. Even if you're not copying, but you're playing a ton of instants and sorceries, I think this card is absolutely incredible. You can get so many treasure tokens and it's just a whenever you cast it. So it's like you're just getting them every single time you're doing that. Storm-Kiln Artisan is great. It's one of my personal favorite red cards, and that's that on that. So yeah, guys, that is everything. Those are for 10 additional red staples. I'd really love to know in a comment what is your favorite red staple. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and I'll catch you in my next one.